Oh, hello, beautiful people. I hope that wherever you are and whatever is happening, you are having a good evening. I am still trying to figure out my setup here a little bit, so I pardon and apologize if the camera is a little wonky. I'm trying to do the best I can. How's everybody doing tonight? So glad we have a few folks with us for this conversation on difficult family dynamics while care planning. And I will tell you, it was funny while I was writing up my thoughts for tonight. I was like, this is impossible. Like I've done this, I've helped people, I've applied some of these in my own family, but it takes a lot of self-control and self-will, and it is not the easiest thing to do. So, this is going to be a series of tips and strategies about how do you do what is best for your loved one, engage your family to the degree that it makes sense. And here we have a very expansive view of family. We don't just mean bio family or family of origin, we mean logical family, your support system, anybody that's potentially able to be part of the care. So, hey, Mario. Hello, everybody. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for joining, and I hope that you're doing well tonight. So, when I say difficult family dynamics, what do I mean? I mean, if there is trouble with communication, if a member or two of the group is doing the majority of the care and they're trying to engage other members of the family, I mean, if there's fighting and yelling and refusal or silence, all those things and more are what I mean when I say difficult family dynamics. And I'm sure that you know what I'm talking about. Even if, our families are, even if you happen to have like the most agreeable family in the world that gets along, there's still probably moments that it's not the easiest, right? Where that old history and that old patterns get in the way of good communication or of being able to ask for help and feel supported. I think that's the piece that is so challenging for so many caregivers is that it can be a really isolating experience. You're doing the best you can, you're often balancing a lot, and you just want some help. And it feels like your family should be there to help you or should be asking what they can do or be showing up in exactly the ways you need. And that's just not usually what happens. So, welcome, everyone. So glad that you're here. Please do put your questions, your comments in the chat. I know that many of us on this call have interesting and sometimes difficult family dynamics. So if you have a specific situation without naming names, go ahead and put it in the chat and I'll do my best to give you some tips. Uh, the first thing that I wanted to encourage you to remember is that the past is not the present. When it comes to your family, the past is not the present. What that means is that oftentimes when we are planning for care or when a crisis happens, we all act like we're still 7 years old. We engage with our siblings in a very different way than we engage with anybody else. And if we're talking about, aunts, uncles, parents, those patterns can be rooted in the past. And you can feel that power imbalance or you can feel those old hurts. So I encourage you if you can, and again, I said this is not going to be easy, y'all. It's not easy to move past your instincts or the way you've always operated with your family. But it is worth it because it helps preserve the relationship and you tend to actually get more support. So, first tip, let the past be the past. Leave it there. If there's old feelings about, this person was the favorite, or you got treated differently, or, you never listened to me when we were young, or whatever the ripples and the ruts and the hard points are, if you're trying to connect with your family around planning for care, it helps to let that stuff be in the past and not make assumptions about the other person anymore. It only takes one person to change the dynamic of a relationship. It really does. And I've seen that be the case in families. Oftentimes, I've worked with people, and even in my own family, people who want to be close, who want to be in relationship with each other, but they just don't get each other, or they don't communicate well, or, they're holding on to those old hurts. And one person changing the dynamic, changing their style, can totally change the relationship because it opens a new door. So I'm going to pause there. And I really encourage folks, if you have questions, if you want to hop on and chat with me about this subject, please do. This is a very dynamic conversation and topic, and I'd love to hear what you're thinking. But have you seen that? Have you seen a relationship with a family member change based on one person in that relationship shifting their style? I have a family member who I love dearly, 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 dearly. And our relationship has been tumultuous for a long time. And I feel like I've done everything I can, been as open and encouraging and communicative as I could be. And finally, I realized the only thing that there was left for me to do was to be silent and to not reach out and to not try and to give it time and space to transition, for us to feel new and different about each other. And in this scenario, that was the right thing to do. And this isn't about caregiving, it's just about family dynamics. So I think, whatever your role in the family has been, you might be a more directive person. You might be more passive. You might be that person that's kind of away from the family, or you might be the center of the family. Everyone has their role and everyone has value, in my opinion. But you can act differently and communicate differently in your role. So for me, you all know I'm a builder and a feeler, and I try to support people, and I'm try to be warm and open about emotions. Everybody's not that way. So in this situation, it was helpful to just chill and not try to fix anything, not try to build bridges, but just let that person come to me in their own time. And it seems to be working. It's surprising how much a shift in your style can impact the relationship. I see we have a comment. Hi, Ishara. Glad that you're here. It says, if you've tried to approach a dynamic differently but faced resistance, what should you try next, especially if they seem wedded to the past? Great question. You think you've tried to approach something differently, but it doesn't seem to be working, and that person seems to be rooted in the past. One strategy I really appreciate around this, where it's just like there's that boulder in the way of the relationship, and there doesn't seem to be a way to move it, is to just talk about the boulder, right? And to do this in an open way, not assuming you know the answer and not letting yourself get upset. This is the hardest to do with family. Most of us have these skills, whether it's from jobs in customer service, working with people in general, raising your children. Most of us have cultivated somewhere in our lives the ability to listen and be still and just listen. But we don't usually act that way with our family, right? Especially our peers. So that's the first thing I would say is whatever you're going to try next, whatever strategy, and I recommend open-ended questions that get to the meat of that boulder. Just listen. Listen longer than you think you need to, and don't come with any defensiveness. This is why I said this is hard to do. Because with your family, you have your own story, right? You're not dispassionate. You have your own experience, and you're like, but wait, that's not what happened, and this is how I felt, and this is where you were treated differently. None of that is helpful. None of it. Think about how you feel when you're upset. If you're really upset about something and you're holding on to it for years, You don't need to hear the other person's side in that moment when you're expressing yourself. You want to be validated. Even if what you're saying may not be reasonable, right? Or may not be the full story, it's okay. I had a former mentor who I just appreciate so much. And she used to tell me, Jackie, do you want to be right or win? Is it more important to be right in this moment and to know the right answer? Or is it more important for the win to happen, right? The right outcome or the whole team, coming together. And I didn't always know when she first told me that. I was like, well, both. I want to be correct and I also want us to win. And I think they go hand in hand because I would assume that my way would get us there because it typically does. But the relationship is the win, right? So let's take an example where you have a family member who keeps drawing on the past, and you've tried to talk it out, you've tried to, you know, move around it, you've tried to ignore it, you've tried a lot of different strategies. This calling in would go like this, to say, hey, our relationship means so much to me, and I think it means a lot to you. Can we set aside some time to just talk it out? I just want to listen to what you have to say. I'm going to try not to say anything because I really want to hear you so we can move past this. And then you wait for the response. And then you set that time. You don't spring it on them. You don't just try to have that conversation because it's convenient at the holiday or at a family dinner. That's a surprise and you're not going to get the best of that person. Set a time if you can. And then you start that conversation in the same way and you say, hey, I love you. I have loved you your whole life. I'm going to love you for our whole lives. And I think our relationship could be better. What I'm going to try to do in this conversation is just listen. And maybe there will be a time in the future, where I can share my perspective. But for right now, I just want to hear you. Please tell me everything that is stressing you out about our relationship. Get it on the table. Because right now we're just losing time. We're losing time that we could be connecting with each other, that we could be in better relationship with each other. And you mean too much to me to let that opportunity go. So please lay it on me. What are your issues with me? And then you do the hard work of staying still and of being quiet and of listening and of trying to process what you're hearing. Because when you're hearing those things, you're hearing the other person's pain. You might also be hearing critique of yourself. And it's hard to not have a reaction. The reactions that are most helpful in that scenario are to just be affirming of like, that sounds really hard. I'm sorry that impacted you that way. Thank you for letting me know. I'd love to respond to that at another time, but like I said, this is just about you right now. Think about how you would feel if a family member you had difficulty with did that for you. Would you feel differently? If you, in your relationship with that family member, if it was reversed and you were just listened to and there wasn't the back and forth, there was just deep listening. Go ahead and put in the chat how you think you would feel. I'm curious because I think for most of us, it would feel healing to not have the fight and the struggle that you have when two people share a story, right? Which is often the case with siblings, with family systems. You often feel like you share a story and the tension is, we don't have the same story. We didn't have the same experience. There were things that were fair and things that weren't fair. And that hurts. So that would be my advice for if you have a difficult dynamic where you feel like you've tried different things. Sometimes the best thing is give it a little bit of time Ask for the time to talk about it, and then just get ready to listen deeply. And I've shared this story before, but this is actually what changed my relationship with my mom. My mom and I had you know, I'm the eldest child, so we had a very, very close relationship growing up. I was her junior helper. She's my best friend. She poured so much into us. Like the love was always there, but the understanding was not. And for me, the respect was not. There were places where I did not respect my mom for a long time because of decisions that had happened in the family. And so there was about 20 years where I didn't feel like I had a relationship with my mom. And that was really hard, even though I tried to act like it was okay or, you know, she'll never change, it'll never be better. That was the story I told myself about our relationship. But after I got some new tools around communication, I tried them. I tried deep listening. And I also tried calling in the big boulders, right? Or what I thought the big boulders might be. So, what happened actually was one night I was sitting with her. My mom sort of utilized me as a therapist a bit, like wanted to talk out every issue with me. And that was hard because if she was talking about family members that I loved, it felt really not okay. I felt like I had to defend those family members. And so I did. That was our communication pattern. She would tell me how terrible things were with certain family members or critique them. And I would be like, they're good people. I love them. I think you're wrong here. And then we would have a fight. That was not helpful. And I didn't realize that was getting in the way of having a better relationship. So one night I got so frustrated with her, I was like, I'm just going to try something radically different. And I just sat on the couch. She was in her chair. I sat on the couch and I just said, can we talk about what's really bothering you? Because you've had these same complaints for 20 years. And it could be about these people, but I think it's probably about something else. What is really bothering you? What is really making you sad or angry or frustrated to the point where, you're feeling this agitated? Just tell me what it is. Because I don't think it's these people. You love these people unconditionally. What's the big thing that is making you so sad? And because she had been in that pattern of sort of critique for so long, it took an hour and a half of me listening before we got to the real boulder, which was the fact that she was depressed, that her body was changing, and that she was not ever going to be able to do, pardon me, I'm probably going to cry a little bit, that she was not ever going to be able to do the things that she wanted to, like run or be fully independent in terms of her mobility. She was struggling with constant pain. And nobody else in our family, of course, understood that. So the critique was not really about what the family members were or weren't doing. It was sadness manifesting as anger and disappointment. And I think also probably a bit of jealousy. You see the family members running around doing things on the uphill, right? Achieving and going. And she was proud of them, but it also really highlighted how sad she was. But she couldn't say that, or she didn't think to say that, which is what, with family, it's not always reasonable. It's just not always reasonable. You don't do the thing that actually makes you vulnerable. You do the thing that hides you. So for me, that was the thing that changed and shifted my relationship with my mom, which I'm so grateful for, because I listened to her for 3 hours and it wasn't easy. There were so many points where I was like, but I just tried to tamp it down so that she could move through that stress and anxiety and get the boulder off her chest. And then we were able to connect in a very different way. And we had so much sweetness and so much care and so much more mutual understanding because we had shifted the pattern. And that was me that shifted that pattern. If I hadn't been open to trying something new, radically different, and get my ego out of the way and my defensiveness and my sense of like, but that's not right. If I hadn't been able to quiet that voice, we would have been stuck in that pattern until she passed. And I'm so grateful that that didn't happen. And when I said at the beginning, it's not easy, I mean, it's not easy. But it can be worth it. It can be the only thing that changes that dynamic. Thank you for folks in the chat who are sharing, and please do share. I wasn't expecting to cry tonight. But family's family. And, I think it's some of our deepest hurt and also our deepest hope. I think most of us hope that we can be close with our families, even when we're not, or we wish it could be different, even if we're not sure how to make it happen. So please do keep putting things in the chat, what your experiences are, what your questions are, and I'll try to keep moving through them. We have a chat comment that says, our own reality can hurt really deep, and it can make a person feel so isolated. 100%. 100%. And it's so hard because then multiple family members feel isolated, right? Passing is time lost. We spent 20 years in conflict, or I was feeling tension and conflict in the relationship. And I wish that it had been different, but I didn't have those tools then. I do now, which is why I feel so passionately about helping others, if it is helpful, try to figure out a new way of being and connecting. So if you're feeling isolated, if you have been hurt, that there are some family situations that are beyond repair. So I don't want you to think that that I am encouraging you if there is a member of your family that has harmed you. I want you to think that I'm advising to reconnect with every member of your family. This is about if you are trying to improve those relationships, typically for care of a loved one, right? There is a lot that goes down in families that is not okay. And it's all right for it to be not okay. I'm not advising that you be, some just saint of a human being and connect with people that aren't good for you or are dangerous to you. But in a family system where you need help or you want support or you want to improve a relationship, hopefully these tips will be helpful. So let me know if you have other questions, because otherwise I'm just going to keep going on because I got other ideas that I want to share. One of the things to bring it back to kind of just general shifting and improving of relationships is to ask for meaningful input. That's part of the deep listening. But it doesn't have to be just about, the thing that happened in the past or the dynamics that have caused disruption in your relationship. It can be about anything. So for example, when you're caregiving or if you're kind of the primary problem solver in the family, people are probably used to you just handling it. Or if you're not the primary problem solver, they have a whole story about why you're not showing up or why you're not helping out. The deep listening and asking for collaboration, like not telling people what to do, which is what I often see is, a caregiver who's overwhelmed saying, I just need them to come do overnights. I just need them to give me a break. And like, I'm with mom all day long and they barely show up. I need them to do this and show up in this exact way. Well, understandable. You know what you need, and that is great. But you don't know why the other person's not showing up, and you don't know what and how they might be able to bring gifts to the table. So I always suggest ask for input and problem solving together and really listen. Again, You're hearing this theme of listen, listen, listen again. So say, for example, you are that person and you do need help with the overnights. You can approach it two ways. The way I just said, which is, hey, I'm taking care of mom all day long. You need to get over here and be with her a couple nights a week so that I can get a break and get some sleep. That's one way to approach it. And you might have some family members that appreciate the clarity, appreciate the directness, and just needed to know how to show up. But if you have a contentious relationship, the other person is going to buckle and they're going to say, no, you're not telling me what to do. And I'm not going to do anything I don't want to do. So a second way to approach it can be saying something like, hey, I'm really struggling in terms of sleep and my well-being, and I want to keep supporting mom, but I'm not exactly sure how to do that going forward. Can we just talk about some options? What ideas you have, what ideas I have, and I'm sure we'll figure it out, right? So that opens up communication for them to have input and for them to feel invested in the solution, not just a means to an end. People don't want to feel like just a means to an end. So I hope that makes sense. And if you have questions, go ahead and put it in the chat. Welcome to new folks who have joined us. I'm so glad you're here. Please keep coming back. We love having these conversations, and I really, really enjoy hearing from you all and being able to have a back and forth, because this stuff ain't easy, and life ain't the easiest right now. I really feel like we all need each other, and it's just always a pleasure to be in the room with you. So thank you for being here tonight. We're talking about difficult family dynamics and how to shift those when you're planning for care or just generally. So a lot of what I've said tonight is about listening, and listening with an open mind and an open heart. The second tip I suggested is asking for meaningful input, so problem solving. And I utilize these strategies not just in families, but also in workplace environments. So anybody who has worked before probably has had a job where you felt underutilized, unheard, or, just not part of the decision-making table. And that feeling kind of dampens your spirit and can mess up your morale. So the same is true in a business or a workplace setting. Anywhere where you're trying to accomplish a goal, it really helps to get meaningful input. For example, and I know this is kind of off the beaten track, but we do both worlds. We work with individuals and families, and we work with organizations, and I think these tools for communication are effective in both settings. But for example, everybody was impacted by return to work protocols with COVID. So anybody in an office that wasn't remote or wasn't going to stay remote was really impacted by the return to work policies, and still are. Many offices just did a top-down approach, and they would say, well, people need to return to work 3 days a week, or we're back in the office full time, and there was no discussion, no staff input. The better ways that I've seen it go are when an organization says, hey, we don't know everybody's situation. Let's have a staff meeting or have a staff task force that really can lead this with us, so that we can talk about the agency protocol reasons and why we need to be having people back in work. And the staff members who are most impacted can name their concerns and their issues and their ideas, so that we arrive in the right place and it's equitable and people are informed and invested. I find that collaboration and finding ways to collaborate 9 times out of 10 improves communication in a whole different set of areas. So I hope that's helpful. Take that for what it's worth. I have a couple other tips. Appreciation. Appreciation is so critical. And again, with families, we just don't tend to appreciate each other and say it out loud. And I think there's a lot of reasons for this. I've seen that be generational, where maybe the older generations, like weren't as comfortable expressing affection or saying I love you or praising, what someone did. It's sort of, they were existing and you were family and that was it. And you didn't need to talk about it and you didn't need to say all this stuff. I have a set of family that like doesn't celebrate birthdays, and I don't understand. I'm like, why wouldn't we celebrate birthdays? It feels like the most natural thing in the world to celebrate that someone arrived here and they're still here. But they're like, no, it was never a thing. We didn't celebrate anything. We celebrated one or two holidays, but we were just living and existing and surviving. So I think sometimes the family culture and dynamics are just kind of functional, right? We know we're there for each other. We know we're family, but we don't really need to talk about it or say thank you or be appreciative in a particular way. But honestly, when times are tough and when those dynamics are difficult, a soothing word, a kind word, an unexpected positive affirmation can again be the way that you change that dynamic. And I really believe in the long term. I think that even if a relationship is hard, there is still hope for it to change. And I believe that because I've seen it happen and because I'm somebody that's going to love my people all the way through their lifetime. So I have to hope. I have to hope that even the difficult relationships will get better over time if I am consistent and consistently check in or show up or express that love and appreciation. So I find that whatever you normally do, naming your appreciation more frequently can change the dynamic. And this is especially true when you're trying to problem solve together or caregive together. I feel like I'm using a lot of personal examples tonight, but so be it. And if you all have examples, put them in the chat. Or again, if you have questions, put them in the chat. But, you know, I had a little bit of difficulty. I've always been a person that like does a lot, right? My standards are high. I want to do things the right way. I want to be sure that people are taken care of. So I tend to extend myself for the good of other people. But I don't like criticism. I don't like criticism, especially if somebody isn't showing up in anywhere near the same way I am, right? I'm not somebody who really loves to be told or asked a ton of questions or whatever. If I'm in drive mode, I'm in drive mode. And that was what was happening with my mom last year, right? I was in the house, I was with her, I was doing the care work with my dad every day. And I had a family member who would just always be asking me these questions about the recommendations that I made. And I thought I had explained things and, been like, well, here's what she wants and here's what, this service is and here's how we can think about it. But this person is very smart and very analytical and just kept asking me a million questions and sort of insinuating like, is this the right thing? Should we be doing this a different way? How do you really know? And I'm like, I've been a caregiver for 20 years. I know. I know what these services are. Why are you questioning me? But I realized after we talked and I listened that this person was just trying to, really make it make sense for them. They're like, I don't have the same education you have. I don't understand. I just am trying to understand. And I was like, I've given you a lot of resources. When you come at me that way, it feels like critique and it makes me feel defensive. I'm going to try to deal with my stuff around that. But I also encourage you to use the resources and do the research with the things I've given you. And also maybe say thank you once in a while or tell me where things are going right. Because it's easier to deal with those questions and those dynamics if there's any kind of appreciation. And I've seen this not just, of course, for myself, but for the hundreds of families that I've worked with. It is very intense. Caregiving is very intense. And loving people is very intense. And being in a house and being housemates with your partner, your spouse, your kids, your parents, your friends, it's all kind of overlapping dynamics, right? Your family, your housemates, you may have bank accounts together, you may, have hobbies or things you do together. There's a lot of overlapping relationships with the people we're close with oftentimes. So I just find that a word of kindness and a word of appreciation goes so far to soothing those tense places. Even when you're not sure, or when you're not sure if you really feel it, right? Oftentimes with our family, we're not used to saying, "Hey, I appreciate this about you. Thank you so much for this. I thought what you did there was really awesome." We're not always used to saying that out loud, but that's another key element of shifting a relationship. So if you picture and think about a difficult relationship in your life, even with somebody who maybe, would say, "I don't care if you tell me I'm doing a good job," or "I don't care if you tell me, that I did something good." Just think about that situation and imagine if you approached it with that kind of appreciation and kindness, and you just let that sit. You didn't try to problem solve. You didn't try to tell them where it could be better. You just said, "Hey, thank you so much for what you're doing. I really appreciate you." Or say that a person is, struggling in their lives. You don't have to tell them it's going to be okay, and you don't have to fix it for them. But you can say something like, "I know that you will figure it out. You will find the right answer. You know yourself, and this is your journey. I want to see you thrive, and I know that that's possible for you. And I'll be here if you need anything." Right? And just letting it sit, not trying to problem solve, not trying to tell them where they're messing up, just letting it sit. I'm going to tell y'all, the older I get, the more I lean on pauses and silence. I find that it's so helpful to be able to bring my best self, to collect my thoughts, and to really be sure the other person feels heard. To not fill the silence with problem solving or fill the silence with, anything. Just to let it sit and wait and really see if the other person has more to say, or let them feel what they're feeling. Because especially with family, like, those bonds are so tight, it takes all of us a minute to loosen up. If a family member who you know, and you know how they react and respond, and then all of a sudden they respond a little differently to you, or where they would have brought, a kind of like, "Well, it should be this way, we should do it this way" energy. If they're now just listening and not trying to tell you what to do, it takes you a minute to loosen up those bonds. It takes you a minute to be like, "Wait, is this real? Is this person really listening to me? Is that, is it going to be okay? Or are they going to come right back in with another critique?" So really just think about, that person or those people in your family system that you want to change the relationship with. And think about those three things. First being listen, listen, listen. Second being, don't be afraid to call in the thing that is the real issue and hear them out without response, just with listening and with validation. Third being asking for meaningful input, right? If we're going to problem solve, or if I am approaching something that might be touchy, asking for your input to say, "Hey, let's talk about it. I want to hear your ideas here. I know what the need is, but I don't know how we're going to get there." And fourth being the appreciation. It's not just kindness, because I think oftentimes family members are so kind in a million small ways, but the verbal, saying it out loud, saying that, like, "Listen, you're your own person, you're on your own journey, and I deeply care about you. I want to see you do well. I'm proud of how you've gotten through things, And I really believe that you can figure this out. And I'll be here to listen, or I'll be here to support you. So, and I'm saying this in part because I know we have a few folks in the room who are parents. Ooh, and it is tough to change those dynamics, because as a parent, you pour into your kids. Most parents would give their kids anything they could. And it's so hard to know what's the line and how do I set them up for success to be as independent as possible. I think one of the things that is helpful, in addition to what I've shared already, is naming where people have choice, right? And this is again specifically around parenting. And I've been on this journey too, and it has been not easy. But I realized at a certain point that I wasn't helping the person I was parenting because I was problem solving for her. I was like, oh, this happened. This crisis happened in your life. Let me figure it out with you. I'll pay for this. I'll do this. We'll connect you to this service. I'll come get you and bring you home. And it needed to change, because that's the way you parent at a certain age and stage in someone's life, right? You swoop in, you problem solve, you take care of things. But I realized this person is an adult, and it's no longer my role to problem solve for them. I can problem solve with them, but I need to be sure that this person knows you can stand on your own. You can solve your own problems. And so I had to shift my language around that to, instead of, giving the answers and giving the solutions, to say things like, well, what do you think? These are decisions that you will be living with. These are choices you are making that will have repercussions. What do you think is right for you? Not I recommend, or, if you do this, this is what's going to happen, but really encouraging that critical thinking to say, hey, you have choice. You're making choices every day here. And it's not, I can't make that choice for you because I'm living my own life and making my own choices. But what are you going to do in this moment? What's right for you? And please recognize you're making choices that then have outcomes, so that you're doing that in an informed way and you're becoming a self-sustaining adult. So I think that's a really challenging dynamic, is how you move from being a parent to a baby, to being a parent to a toddler, to being a parent to a middle school kid or a teenager, to then a young adult, to then a middle-aged person. It's not the same kind of parent. It's not the same kind of approach. So being able to be flexible, and through both appreciation, collaboration, and choice, letting the person know, hey, you can get through this. You've gotten this far. Even if they're really difficult choices, right? So I have a client who her son had utilized drugs for a long, long time and had a number of health conditions. And, she has been so loving and so caring towards him, and tries to give choice where she can. But I think that it could be done a little bit differently, because the choices she tries to give are basically what he says he wants. She tries to meet that need. So it's less of the critical thinking and less of the, hey, let's think about what got us here, and let's think about what's going to move us forward. And more of the, oh, you want this kind of room, you want this kind of service, you want this kind of, okay, I'll make it happen. So it's tough. It's tough because we want to problem solve for the people we love, but that's not always the right answer. Sometimes the right answer is what, like I've said, stillness, quiet, letting them think and reflect, affirming where you can, and then naming the choices that are being made. And I think what this is bringing up for me right now is the fact that in so many of our family systems, what we're afraid of is the shame and the disappointment, right? Like, we're sometimes afraid to be vulnerable with our families because we're afraid they're not going to like what we're doing, what we're saying, or who we are. And it hurts the most when you feel that you have disappointed your family or that they don't look on you favorably. It's so, so tough. But it's really important to, I think, it's really important to be solid in who you are and also allow for the possibility that these relationships can change and that people can surprise you. And that, like I said, if you shift your approach, it has to shift the dance. It has to shift the dance, right? There have been occasions with family members who who I had difficult relationships with where I felt like I was constantly learning and constantly trying new things. For example, there's a family member of mine who is just kind of a quiet person and who I've never really gotten in terms of communication. We don't have a bad relationship, but we don't have much of a relationship. And I saw another family of mine with them and I paid attention to their communication and I was like, wow, I am learning so much about how to connect with this person just by observing how their relationship dynamic is with this other family member. And it was so helpful. It was so helpful because now I feel like I got to see and witness who and how that person connects with, and I can adjust my part in our dance. And it will change and shift if I communicate in the way that, or closer to the way that that other person does. Then, I'm changing the pattern. And I'm not just being, I'm this way and this is how I always am. And I don't need to change, you need to change. Anybody had that in their family? I imagine some of us have. So I hope that helps. I'm trying to see if there's anything else that I wanted to that I wanted to name. I think the only other thing I would name is not assuming that you know someone else's story and motivations. And I mentioned that earlier in this conversation, getting cozy with the care plan, but I can't mention it enough. You might think that you know that story, and you probably don't. This has been helpful for me to remember because we really utilize a framework of trauma informed care. And a trauma informed approach assumes that the people that you are working with, interacting with, speaking with have experienced some form of trauma. And that kind of impacts how you approach them, right? Or how you react or respond to the energy that they bring. So it's helpful because trauma is made up of three different things: events, the experiences of those events or associated with them, and the effects. So that's really helpful to remember, especially for siblings or parents and children or families growing up. Like I said earlier, you think you have the same story, but you have a series of events that you all experienced a little bit differently. And the effects of those experiences create even more distance, right? I can be under the same roof in the same room as somebody for years and years and years, and what that person remembers is different than what I remember. And the things that hurt that person are different than the things that hurt me. So even if I think I know what that other person is thinking, there's always more to the story. And there's value in letting them tell it and just listening and affirming what they're saying. So I feel like this one was a very deep water conversation. I hope that this was helpful for you. How are y'all feeling? How we doing? I'm glad y'all are still with me. Thank you for being with me in this journey. And it's been so, so lovely to have these conversations with you. If you find value in them, share them with somebody who's struggling. Share them with somebody who is dealing with difficult family dynamics and for whom these tips and strategies might help. We put this information out. We do this every week to create community and to also bring resources during this continued tough time. So please do share. And if you're interested, I won't be here next week because I'll be at the Creating Change conference in California. but we'll be back the third week of February. So check out the other videos, share them on your social media, or text them to your friends who are in need. And just thank you so much for being part of our community. We are the Care Plan. I am Jackie Boyd, and I'm so, so grateful to be with you. Take good care, have a good night, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.